Welcome everyone to our CMX Masterclass, Getting Executive Buy-in. Really quickly, I'm gonna run through the agenda. We've got the welcome with Moa, then we'll have the masterclass with Lisa. We'll move into a live Q&A where you can ask any questions you'd like about Lisa's presentation. Then we will go into live breakout sessions. I encourage everyone to stay on and participate. It's going to be random. We'll break you out into groups of 4, and you can chat about everything that we've just learned. We'll come back, wrap up, popcorn share some key insights and actionable takeaway items that we want to implement literally today. And then we're all done. So our CMX Masterclass series, these are deep dives into specific subjects or areas, expert talk, Lisa, range of levels. We've got some actionable tips. We are here to solve your pain points and provide you with help and the tools you need to further succeed and thrive in your career. My email is open. If you have a subject matter that you want to discuss and you want me to look into, please reach out to me. I'm here to help, listen, and make sure that we put the best possible content up here for our masterclasses. Our goals: connect, meet community professionals. We'll be doing that during the breakouts. Learn, get one actionable thing you can implement today. I've seen Lisa's presentation and I know there will be more than one. Advocate, grow the community industry. These events are powered by Bevy. We are a software in the business of building community. Everything from the RSVP page to the platform you're on now to the post-event survey that I hope you will fill out is all on this platform. Please reach out at bevy.com if you'd like some more info. All right, and now we are here. I am so thrilled to introduce everyone to Lisa Tallman. She is the senior thought leader and strategist dedicated to social good, the AVP, Affiliate and Network Advancement for the National Office of Easter Seals, leading initiatives in strategy, data, knowledge management, and technology. All right, Lisa, are we ready? I'm going to stop my screen share right now.
We are definitely ready. Thanks, Anne-Marie, for that great introduction. I will start my screen share. There we go. I was like, I still just see me. All right, excellent. So thanks everyone for joining, especially my network. It's great again to see some faces in the chat and in the attendee list of people that I know. So thanks for coming out and joining me today. And for all of you I don't know, hopefully we'll know a little bit more about each other before the end of this session today. So we're here to talk about getting executive buy-in. And my personal experience with this topic is summed up with a quote from a motivational speaker and writer. His name is Dennis Waitley. And he said, "Never become so much of an expert that you stop gaining expertise. View life as a continuous learning experience." And I think that's how I approach life and work. It's a continuous learning experience. So what I'm going to share with you today are things that I've learned over time in my entire professional career. I know this is a masterclass for experts. I don't know that I'm an expert, but I do hope that my experience contains value for you all. So with that, a little bit more about myself. I have over 15 years in the knowledge management and community management industry and functions. But I've done a variety of things in my career. I know some of you on this call have kind of just found your way to community management. You didn't start here just like myself. I started as a retail store manager in my teens. I was a technical writer for years. I've led a technical support department and business process improvement team. And even in my current position, as Anne-Marie talked about, I do more than community management. So no, I've done a lot of that for a big bulk of my career. I've certainly done other things as well. And the slide that you see, the picture that you see, I'm based in Chicago. I've worked in one of the fun things about me is that I'm a docent for the Chicago Architecture Center. So if you're on earlier, Anne Marie and I were talking about that, I actually give tours for the city of Chicago, and we'll soon be fully vaccinated and actually will be back out giving tours again. So I'm happy to be able to sort of go back to some semblance of normal life. I've worked for for-profits, nonprofits, various different industries. I have a master's in English written communication. I also have an MBA from the University of Chicago, and I am a certified change management professional. So I like to say I have a good mix of both hard and soft skills. So this is our agenda for today. First, I'm going to start by talking about some limiting beliefs. For me, mindset is everything, particularly when it's about executives, right? When you're trying to influence executives, you need to have credibility, confidence to gain their commitment. And that really all starts with you and what you believe about yourself and how you show up at work every day. So that's where we're going to start. And then we're going to move on to some strategies and tactics. And lastly, some calls to action that I hope will be the start of the conversation for the breakout groups. So mindset, as I mentioned, is everything, conveying confidence, credibility. Your beliefs are what empower you, and it's the basis for your action. The picture that you see on this screen is actually from the class that I teach. So I teach a class at Northwestern University. It's called Creating and Sharing Knowledge. And it is about how to bring enterprise social technologies into the workplace. And I use this picture and talk about this class because we have the students do an assignment. And that assignment is to articulate how their thinking has changed from the beginning of class to how they feel at the end of class, what they've learned. And that's how I've set up this next section to show you what I once thought and then how I've changed my thinking over time and how I've moved from these limiting beliefs to empowerment. So I'm going to go through these beliefs. Please, in the chat, in the Q&A, go ahead and ask questions, and we'll have points in time where I'll be able to answer them along as well. So the first limiting belief is all about organizational hierarchy, that chain of command. I used to believe that title matters and it dictates who I should talk to, how I should talk to them, the deference I should have. But what I've learned is that it doesn't matter. Regardless of title or level, I contact the people that I need to speak with or get buy-in from. Doesn't matter who they are. And I speak with them with confidence and I view them as my equal. Doesn't matter what title they have. And I made a conscious, intentional decision to do this, to say to myself, that title really doesn't matter. I am just as valuable, I am just as important as anyone else in this organization, whether that's the CEO or anyone. And I know I haven't always felt like this, but I've had to mature into this mindset about how I show up at work. And the next limiting belief, I'll talk about a story here that kind of brought me to this mindset about organizational hierarchy. And that limiting belief is about, this merit-based system, this idea that if we do the work, then it's going to speak for itself and we're going to be rewarded. We're going to get the resources we need. And all of that's going to follow as long as we do what we're supposed to be doing. And I kind of gave up on this a long time ago. And it started at an organization that was doing layoffs. And at that organization, I had a team of 9 people. At that organization, we had to force rank all of our staff. So we had to put the top of our staff and then the bottom 10%. And we had to rank them. Well, we went through a round of layoffs. They did not actually include management in the decision, at least at my level, in the decisions of who to lay off. And so I had been ranking my staff all this time, and they didn't use it at all to determine who got laid off. And it was so bad that one of my staff picked up the phone and he called me and he said, "Do I still have a job?" And the reason why he did that is because he knew he was in the bottom 10%. He was surprised and frankly shocked enough to pick up the phone and call me to go, "Are you sure that I still have a job?" And it just really, sort of soured me on this, this merit-based system. So what this situation forced me to do was to walk into the head of the division and to say to him, "You guys got this completely wrong. So wrong that the person who should have been laid off actually called me and said I should have been laid off. I can't believe I still have a job." And it's that sort of situation that made me really think about, how do I show up with executives? How do I make sure that I and my team are getting what they need? And so now I think you have to take credit for the work that you do. You have to do this calculated bragging. I see, I noted someone in the chat had a thumbs up for that. And you need to ask for what's necessary. And so Anne-Marie asked me to talk a little bit about what it means to brag, right? It's hard for some of us to do. And I have an example of that as well. So I launched a new in one organization, I launched a new platform. And in doing that, I had a communication plan in which I wrote this article very shortly after the platform was launched, really about the benefits of sharing, community, collaboration, and how it could help us reach our organizational goals. And it went out to the whole network of community individuals. One of them, person who I had never met, called me and said, "Lisa, I read your article. It's one of the best things I've read. I am fully on board. How can I help? How can I be a part of this?" And it was genuine, and it was, touching that he had taken the time and effort to do that. And instead of just keeping that to myself, I forwarded that to my executive as well as my team. It's not me, bragging on myself, but it's certainly making sure that those things are known. So I would ask you, what emails are sitting in your inbox about the great work that you're doing that you can forward to your executive sponsor? People do praise you. People do thank you for the work that you're doing. How can you take credit for that work and share that work? The other thing that I have changed in at times doing is using I versus we. It is very much a we for me. Like, it is my team, right? We are working together to collaborate and do this. But there are points and times where you need to change that we to I and really take credit for the work that you're doing. So think about the language that you're using and when it's appropriate to say I and when it's appropriate to take that credit for yourself. I always say that the best person to look out for you and your team, if you have one, is you. No one else is going to do it for you. The other thing that I have learned is you can't do it alone. I truly have a firm belief in my confidence, my words, my experience, my expertise, but I am also humble enough to know that sometimes it is just not enough. I have worked at organizations where an individual could talk to, they're blue in the face, But if a consultant comes in and says the exact same thing, that's who they're going to believe. And so when I've needed to, I have brought consultants in when I've had to make a point to move a strategy or something significant along. Using data and having that data at the ready is also very important. And if you are managing a team, your team must walk the walk and talk the talk. As a combined force, you can encourage executives, influence executives, but sometimes you need outside help and you need to figure out who to bring in on your team that will also go to bat for you. And for those of you who are like, I can't afford a consultant, I can't bring anyone in, here's where I say, think about the guest speaker approach. You have other people in this network, on this call, and others that you know about that have expertise, that have knowledge, that have experiences that you can bring in. And you can call them and say, hey, I need to convince my executive of this. Can you come join a meeting with me and talk about what you've done at your organization? And it's even better if they are an executive or if they can bring their executive on the call with you. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything, but it's another voice that someone in your organization can hear from that is not you. So use your network to your advantage. So I see some things in chat. Let's do some more in chat. I have 3 questions. One related to organizational hierarchy. Who do you need? Whose executive's calendar do you want to get on, regardless of where they are in the hierarchy and where you are? What do you need to do some bragging about? And who should you be bringing in as a backup? So pick any of those questions, start putting them in chat. And Anne-Marie, I'll ask you if there's anything in Q&A that we should be talking about. Actually, so I'm looking at Q&A. We have advice for you when you get initial buy-in once the community successfully launched, then you lose executive support to do anything more than minimal life support. Yeah, that is a great question. I will be talking about that in the strategies and tactics. One is, I think you always need to have your own strategy and you need to have a written business case to continually prove that. So I'm going to hold off a little bit and talk more about that in a little bit later in the presentation. Okay, all right. Going to move along here. Continuing with limiting beliefs. So, business value. I used to believe I'm getting paid to do this. They hired me. They were even excited when they hired me. Everyone sees value in this. But what I now think is that you must have a direct, visible, communicated connection to strategic business goals. At the end of the day, your organization has goals that it is trying to achieve, right? And you need to make sure that your work is directly connected to those goals. It's one of the things in the class that I teach that we really hit home, how to make that connection and alignment with business goals. Think about your communities. Think about how they might be strategically positioned to help innovative ideas blossom. So if your organization has a goal about new products and new services, how can you connect what happens in your community to innovation and the sharing of ideas? Or, for example, if cutting costs is an issue, what problem solving happens in your communities that help to use funds in the organization more efficiently? Maybe anecdotal, but you can help to start to prove and connect to business value and business goals if you think What are those goals and how can I tie those goals to what's happening in communities? At the end of the day, executives are accountable for strategic goals, and you need to tie your work to those strategic business goals. And even better, if you can get your work in your organization's strategic plan, then the tie is super easy. I have successfully been able to get knowledge sharing and collaboration as an organizational strategic plan goals, and therefore the tie to those is really super simple. Next limiting belief. RO, return on expectation versus return on investment. We always hear about return on investment, and I used to think I needed to prove it. How do I prove that we're spending this money wisely? Now I think about return on expectations. And for those of you who come from the training, learning environment, this is where this comes from. It's been used to show how training and learning objectives tie to business value and bring returns. And one of the reasons why this is necessary, not only in learning and in our work, it's because ROI is a financial measure, right? It is inherently hard to calculate a financial metric for some of the work that we do each day. What's the financial value of connecting two individuals that can now solve a problem? Perhaps you might be able to isolate this value for two people, but how do you do it for hundreds of people that you're working with? In that case, return on expectations is really a way to think about the work that you're doing this. And it's something that I've sort of intuitively thought about and done over time, but I have to say my Northwestern colleagues have really helped me to put language around this, thinking about this in terms of return on expectations, because often executive expectations are just off the mark. They want to see instant results. And we know that some of our work really takes time to build, and you have to build a story around it. So think about what expectations can be set versus thinking about return on investment metrics, and think about how you can tie those returns to executive needs, executive objectives as well, and create a story around that. So one of the things that I thought about when I thought about return on expectation is getting subject matter experts involved in communities, right? In organizations that I've been in, often subject matter experts are doing it voluntarily. They're doing it on their own time, but the communities need them. They want to see quality. They want to know that there's someone with expertise that's monitoring the community. And so being able to tie this subject matter expertise and their engagement to business value, that those subject matter expertise are contributing to the quality of the platform, the quality of the problem solving, the quality of the innovation, has been really helpful for me to sort of tell this story around business value. But it takes time, and it's connecting sort of this series of dots to think about return on expectation versus return on investment. So I would ask you, what expectations would you set or reset? What are the things that, instead of thinking about ROI, you think about what expectations our executives have that I need to think about differently? So again, if you take a minute, we'll put some ideas in the chat. Yeah, so return on expectation. So someone asked to repeat the definition of return on expectation. So think about expectations as satisfying to the stakeholder, but also realistic to achieve, and that they you can then show how those expectations contribute to key business results. So I'm going to go back again to the example of your company wants to create new products or new services. So the expectation might be the engagement, in this case of online communities, or it could be any stakeholder, the engagement of key stakeholders, key subject matter experts in moderating and being a part of and contributing to your online community that now helps to spur innovation, spur problem solving, spur thought. And then you can point in various ways to how those subject matter experts are engaging, right? If they're engaging, you might have leaderboards. So for example, my online platform had leaderboards, and you can tell the contributions of individuals on the platform. And so you can point to that to say, here we have these subject matter experts on the platform. They are engaging and spurring this community on in a way that wouldn't happen if they were there. As a result, we're getting business value out of this because of what's happening on the platform. And it's creating sort of this chain of events that connect back to strategic business value. Okay. Let's see if there's one more question here. Okay, so there was a comment that others can build on. The comment is, assuming your organization sees the value of community actually is a challenge. Other areas of the business face as well. It might help to brainstorm or trade working the problem cross-functionally to find a new approach. So think about that, the value of community and how you can continue to show that if your organization doesn't see the value already. And we could talk more about that. That's a great question to talk about in the breakout sessions as well, if you can stay. Okay, so I have two more limiting beliefs before I move into the strategies and tactics. The next one is everything is change management. So early in my career, I focused a lot on having the right technology plan, the right communication plan, making sure training was well done, making sure my presentations went over well. And what I've come to learn is that I need to make sure that change management works everywhere, right? That it is embedded in everything that I do. And that I often put change management first versus thinking about these other things. So you're not doing a technology implementation or a technology upgrade. You are actually engaged in a change management initiative. And by thinking about that, you always put people first. And when you think, and that allows you to put your executive first in mind as well. When you think about what you're doing in terms of the change that it affects for a particular executive or a particular executive's department, or what an executive might have to do differently or change, and what's in it for that executive as well, putting that first is critical. And when you think about all the work that you do with a change management perspective first, it allows you to do that. And you'll notice I put action or inaction, right? You can act very intentionally and consciously with change in mind. If you let change management slide, if you don't get to it, it is so hard sometimes to stay on top of the day-to-day operational things that we think about. Okay, well, some of these change behaviors that we're trying to incorporate, some of these change tactics we're trying to incorporate, we just don't have time, we just don't have resources, X, Y, Z. that inaction also has an effect too, and it helps people to slip back into thinking easily about the technology or the communication. So think about what you've been thinking about around change management, because I know this group knows change management is so important, but also think about what you may have allowed to slide in your change management work and how you can get back to that. Because it is the basis for everything and because it puts people first. And then the last thing I'll talk about in terms of limiting beliefs is about your executive sponsorship. So I used to think as long as I had an executive sponsor, that's enough. That's all I needed. Well, now I think you need the right executive sponsor. And if I don't have the right executive sponsor, then I need to use all the previous things I've talked about. I need to think about how to use all, not worry about organizational hierarchy, how to build, not do it alone, right? How to incorporate change if I don't have the right executive sponsor. I don't know about you, but I have been in organizations where I have outlasted a number of leaders in the organization. I've seen whole leadership teams turn over in the organizations that I have been in. And I have been moved in and out of different departments and under different leaders. And so you don't always have the right executive sponsor, and you may not at times even have an executive sponsor. So you need to think about, one, making sure you do have the right one, and figuring out how to get the right one. And I'll talk about a little bit about that later as well in some of the strategies. But if you don't, it's not the end of the world. You can definitely use other tools to talk to and touch executives. Right. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, Marjorie. Have the conversation. If you don't have the right one, have the conversation so you got the right one. Okay. So now we're going to move into some strategies and tactics. So as I mentioned, I started with these limiting beliefs because I have a firm belief myself that you need to have the right mindset to move into talking and influencing executive sponsors, but you also need some clear strategies and tactics behind that. So the very first thing is to actually have a strategy, right? You need to have a written strategy and roadmap for the work that you are doing. You need to have a vision. You need to know what your work looks like, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, where you want to go. Absolutely, as I've mentioned, demonstrate connection to strategic objectives. You want to also explicitly connect the dots between the work that you're doing in other departments, initiatives, project groups, people. And you also want to make sure that they're connected to the right departments, initiatives, projects, and people. It's not going to be helpful to you to make the dots connecting to projects that are executives don't care about, or to departments. Like, we all know there's power dynamics in an organization. You want to make sure you connect with the projects and people and departments that have the power in the organization as well. How do you connect with them? Those are the things that you want to highlight. We've talked about change management. Your strategy should be informed by the past. I have come into organizations that have had, past failures and history that needs to be overcome. And you need to recognize that and integrate that into your strategy and into the change management aspects of your strategy. You need to recognize the present as well. On December 2019, I had just, dotted the I's and crossed the T's on a three-year plan, a 3-year strategy and roadmap. March 2020, that strategy was out the window given the pandemic. And we had to rethink what our present situation because of that. So think about what's happening right now, changes in your organization, and be able to rethink what you're doing to fit current circumstances. And lastly, you want to be able to look to the future. So one of the things that my team and I did is we, in the process of writing our last 3-year strategy, is we looked at external research. We wanted to know what was happening in our area. And I encourage all of you. Anne-Marie started by asking the question, what books are you currently reading? You want to stay up on what's happening in this industry, in your industry, in this space of community management, in adjacent spaces. I really started reading a lot of books on what motivated people, right, in general, and how does that align with community management. So I've taken some time to look at external research and use that to move forward, to think forward looking. And then the last thing, again, grounding this, thinking about return on expectations. Yes, you want to have metrics in there. Yes, you want to understand what's going to make sure things are successful. You show success, but how does that happen by thinking about return on expectations versus return on strategy? Okay. And I'm sorry if you hear construction outside. Of course, today is the day they're doing construction outside my window. All right, next, you want to have a written business case. And when I say a written business case, I'm really talking about the resources that you need. Human resources, technology resources. You want to be able to have this at the ready. I had this ready. I looked at it for every single budget cycle. So once a year, at least once a year, I re-looked at my business case. I was able to document, what current staff resources do I have? What are their responsibilities? What is their capacity and bandwidth? And for many of us, it's not only the capacity that they have, but what they could be doing if we had more resources, right? So helping executives understand, here's what we're doing today. We're maxed out at capacity. And because we're maxed out capacity, here are the things we can't do that we know could provide value to the organization, that we know could help support strategic goals. So making sure that you understand and can articulate that quickly for executives. I also understood and documented current team skills and was always thinking about future skills that were needed. Like if I ever had an opportunity to add someone to my team, what skills was I going to look for so I didn't have to guess? And then other future resources that might be needed. That might be, money for technology upgrades. It might be about, consultants or vendors, whatever it might be, and the why. And I encourage you to write this down. It's always surprised me how all of a sudden something will come up and I'll be asked, hey, Lisa, what about X? And I was able to just whip out either my strategy or my business case to be able to answer that question. I think it's really important to be able to answer questions from executives in 24 hours and not in 24 days, right? You want to be able to have this information kept up to date, written down, and easily accessible and known to you and to your team. And of course, backed up by data, right? We are living in a more and more data-driven culture, right? Data-driven decision-making is become extremely important. If you are doing most good change management methodologies actually start with collecting data. They start with understanding current state and what's happening today. And that could be qualitative data or it could be quantitative data. And I know that that has helped me when I've been thinking about change management initiatives, work as change management initiatives, and collecting this before data, this current state data has been super helpful. I've been able to go back to that data at times to say, here's what we heard from our stakeholders. Here's what we heard from the people that we're serving or our customers. And as a result, this is why we're doing X, Y, and Z. So collecting that type of data and having it from your customers, whether they're internal or external customers, has been, has saved me many times, actually, because it's always been something that I can point back to say, this is why I'm doing this. This is what we've heard. But you have to make sure you collect that data and be able to use it to show how things have changed over time. You also want to make sure that data is in your strategic plan, that you use it in presentations, that it comes up in conversations. So at one organization, we launched a new platform, and every time the CEO saw me, whether that was in the lobby of the building, in the elevator, in the lounge, he asked me, how many people have signed up on the platform? How many accounts do we have? Which is a fine number, but it's really not as we as community professionals know, that is not a meaningful number, right? I wanted to know about engagement, right? Those are the numbers that I care about. So I always had that number for him. I was able to have that one data point for him and say, yes, we have this many accounts. But I always included another more meaningful data point when I had that 30-second conversation with him in the elevator. I might say something like, oh, and by the way, 72% of our leadership team contributed to the platform last week. And the reason why I knew that is because I was collecting those numbers, right? So I always knew the number he asked me for, but I also had a more meaningful number to give him. And then the last thing I'll say about data is to make sure you're collecting select actionable data. I know that we all get requests from people across the organization. Can you start collecting this information or provide this number? And my first question is, how are you going to use it and what actions will result from knowing that information? Because we can collect all sorts of data, many different types of numbers, create all sorts of reports. But if all they're going to do is sit in someone's email inbox with no action taken on them, then it's a waste of resources to do all of that work, to collect the data, to build the report, to provide it, to send the email. So I've always been very clear about, I'm happy to give you data, but what action is going to come of it? Because you want to make sure that you're using your resources wisely. Okay. Your team should be an extension of you. They should be fully involved in creating roadmaps and your vision and your strategy. They should be able to talk about it just as well as you can talk about it. I don't know why I am, but I am always amazed about just how often, your name or someone in your team, if you have a team, comes up in conversations that you are not at all a part of, right? And if someone runs into a member of your team in any circumstance, your team members should be able to articulate all the things that you would articulate to that executive that they also happen to be talking to in the lounge as well. So make sure that your team is fully immersed and involved in all of the things that are happening. Use the same language, and then make sure that you are giving your team what they need, right? Provide opportunities for them to demonstrate strengths, grow in the way that they want to, and more importantly, give them credit for their work. You want to take credit for your work. You want to make sure you give your team credit for the work and their contributions. But you never know who a member of your team is going to talk to or run into, or who they may have better relationships with. So make sure that your team is 100% on the same page that you are and can articulate all the things that you would articulate in any situation. And I'm looking at some of the comments here. Like, for me, language is huge. Like, you want to use the same language. You want to talk about things the same way, right? Especially when you want to change things in your organizations, where you want to get people to stop fixating about technology and start really thinking about the people that are involved. Language is critical in that, and your team needs to talk that same language that you would talk. And the last thing that I have about executive sponsorship or getting executive buy-in is being visible. Executive buy-in does not come overnight. It is not about you giving a single presentation to a leadership team once that's going to get you executive buy-in. Executive buy-in is being visible throughout your organization in ways that are directly connected to your work and in ways that are not directly connected to your work. You can't get executive buy-in if the executives do not know who you are. So think about how you can show up with your own authentic self to be visible in your organization. Some things that I have done is I have always made a point of getting on leadership agendas. So most leadership teams have some cadence of regular meetings. I always made sure that I was periodically, every 3 or 4 months, depending on what was happening, I would make sure I would be on their leadership agenda to provide meaningful updates, right? To show ways that your work was providing value to the organization, to give leadership calls to action, things that you needed them to do. I think what's important when you do that, when you do get on leadership agenda, is that it is not you just talking about them, providing a bunch of numbers or data. It is something meaningful that they're going to come away with, that they're either going to see the value in or see the value in them acting on. So use that time wisely and thoughtfully, but make sure that you do it. Use your strengths and those of your team to engage in activities throughout the organization. And again, even if it's not directly related to your work, we're in the time of Zoom. We're not doing in-person things anymore. But if you're like my organizations, you're hosting Zoom social hours and happy hours and coffee. You may just also be meeting with other people periodically just to catch up and talk to them. Engage in those type of activities. Be a host for the social hour. Be a host for your company's book club for a month. To just be visible in your organization, to network with others in your organization, and find ways to build a trusted reputation throughout your organization. If you're not visible, if executives don't know who you are, it's going to be very hard to get buy-in. And these activities open up conversations. They are the openings for conversation. So pre-COVID, we used to do an all-staff meeting, and I often found myself as the comic relief sometimes, I think, for our all-staff meetings. I can have a quick wit. I can be funny. I have no problem speaking in front of a crowd. And so sometimes in the mix of some of the more boring things, they'd ask me to do something. Some of it I could relate to the work that I was doing. Other things were really just to engage with others in the organization. But it made me visible. And so after the all-staff meeting, whether that's through someone coming up to me or through an email, people would be like, "Hey, Lisa, great to see you." And here's my opening with an executive who's now sent me an email about what just happened at all staff. I now have an opening to talk to that executive, right? And so being visible, thinking about it in different ways, not just directly tied to your work, is essential for getting executive buy-in. And even in this time of Zoom, again, I know many organizations, if they're thinking about the culture and health of their staff, they're doing things, whether that's social hours or book clubs. Right now, my organization is doing a fitness challenge. There are definitely ways that you can get involved, even in our remote work, that will help you connect to executives. And it might take for you to simply put yourself on their calendar and say, hey, 15 minutes, I just wanted to touch base with you. Harder, but definitely doable. And something for us as community professionals, we should definitely be able to do, figure out how to engage people in remote ways. So with that, I encourage you all to step back, take a minute, think about what limiting beliefs you might have and replace it with another belief, a belief that empowers you, a belief that's going to set you in the right mindset to have the confidence and credibility and commitment to talk to your executives, and define one clear action to take. Do you have a written strategy or a written business case? How might you become more visible in your organization and get yourself in front of executives? Think about a clear action that you can take. With that, thank you so much. You can always reach out to me. I am most often on LinkedIn. That is probably the place where you will find me most often. So feel free to connect with me there and message me there. But also Twitter and email are there as well. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Anne Marie, we can take some Q&A if there is any, and prep for the breakouts.
There are so many questions. So I think we are going to go through these, and if we go over a little bit on this, then we'll be fine. We'll just cut back from the wrap up at the end. So I'm definitely able to join, spend a little more time on this. Really excited. Okay, let me get everything pulled up. And I like how you're like, oh, I wouldn't know if I'm an expert. You just experted all over us, Lisa. All over us. Experted. It was crazy. We're so, I don't know about you all there, but I have all my notes. We're ready to go. Oh, and Laura, look what I put back there, Lisa. Oh, hey. I was like, got to get that in there. But let's start off with Van's question and kind of circle back on that. I think that was really, really popular. So he says, what is your advice for when you get initial buy-in and once community is successfully launched, then you lose executive support? So, and then you get on minimal life support, as he says, and says asking for a friend.
So I have been there, Van, and I think that is where my yearly business cases come in. Every budget season, I make the case, whether I'm asked to make the case or not. I have talked to my supervisor and say, here's what I need and here's why. And having it written, having data around it to show value has always been important. There are years where I've gotten nothing, right? Where it's like, yep, I agree with you. See that, you resources need, but this isn't a priority. But there have definitely been years that I have won, that I have finally gotten the resources that I've needed. At one organization, I started out as a team of one person. And by the time I left the organization, I had a team of 7. Team of 6 and 7, including myself. So it grew over time for various different reasons at various different points, but I was consistent about asking and not giving up on asking, and having written documentation about not only what I needed, what I had, what I needed, and where I was going. and how it tied to business value. So you have to be persistent for sure, but you have to have the information and data to back it up.
I love that. Persistent and consistent.
Yes.
I think we've got something there, some sort of framework, right? A rhyming framework, persistent and consistent. Okay, let's go to the next question. All right, so I want to ask this one from Brittany Wilson. They ask, how would you handle a situation where increasing visibility and would increase your workload, but you have absolutely no bandwidth?
Yeah, that is a hard one. My first thought there is borrow. I have tried to borrow people that are also passionate about this work or related things, even if they haven't been in my department. So I have personally found in every organization that there's always one person, another here, another person there, that is just, it's not a part of their job, but they're like really engaged in different ways. And so if I don't have the resources with myself or with my team, who might I borrow, quote unquote, that could take something off my plate or do something else, right? And it might be simple, right? If you're responsible for, monitoring XYZ, who could you get to do something for a few hours a week that you could take off your plate that you could devote to something else? So I think that's one way is the borrowing of other individuals' time who are willing to give it to you. I also would stop, and I think if we all stop and think about it, there are things that we are not efficiently using our time for, right? Or that is not actually providing a lot of value. It might be things that we are just so used to doing that we think we have to do, that we think it must be done, and we may not even question it anymore. And we just devote the time and energy to do it. And I think I think you then have to weigh the pros and cons, right? Something might have to come off your list, but if what you're replacing it with is more valuable than what's on it today, then do the replacement. So I do think we kind of all have to just stop and think, am I as efficient and effective? And am I doing all the things that really provide the value that I think they are providing? Or I'm just doing things because we've always done it that way and it needs, I think it needs to be done. So 2 things to think about.
That's really interesting. And then once you do, recognize that and you can iterate on that and make sure you change, it's up to date, and it's just constantly moving you forward until you actually find your sweet spot and what it is that you need to just get done, right? And be efficient and make sure that it makes the work go. I love it. All right. So the next one is from Lisa. They ask, I manage a global support community program. I have tried broaching the subject of incorporating community support into employee KPIs, but the executive team always falls back on monetary incentives, which can be limited by budget. Have you ever had a similar discussion, and what tactics did you use to prove the case?
Yeah, it's interesting about falling back on monetary incentives because for the first thing that comes to mind is there's so much data that proves that research that proves that monetary incentives don't work long term, right? So, I don't know if you've shown some of that, information, and it's all, not even in the community space, it's in, across many different things that monetary incentives don't work. I personally have sort of been successful in setting the expectation. I think this might go back a little bit to the change management, that this is about people changing behavior and thinking about it from that lens, the other types of incentives that you might think about, and then how to get it into performance reviews, right? To your point. One of the things I've done is I have written performance goals. I have, for other people. So I've written them for leadership. I have taken job descriptions in the organization and, for subject matter experts and say, hey, here's the performance goal, right? That I would put in every performance evaluation for this group of people. So one, I'm writing it for them, right? They don't have to think about it. I'm writing it, I'm providing it to you. And then I have used my executive to help carry that message as well. So here's where using my executive sponsor has been really helpful to carry that message to other executives. But trying to lift off as much work from them as possible, writing the KPIs, writing the performance goals. So all they have to do is literally copy and paste and send it to staff has been helpful. I don't know if that's enough.
Of course it is. And you know what actually reminded me during your presentation when you gave the example that you had an executive who wanted this one number. You gave him that one number. You always had it ready. And yet when you delivered that number, you always snuck in that other engagement metric or the one that mattered to you most, getting your voice in, showing up, making sure that you're heard and what metrics matter to you still gets known. So I thought that would be a great example to tie into that. I'm going to use that trick too. Watch out, David Spinks. Okay, next one, Mike, and it actually ties in to what you'd said about change management. So they asked, can you please give a good best practice or tip regarding the difference between change management mindset versus the old way of thinking? Loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is in our space, it's so much about the technology, right? It is always about what the technology is doing, what functionality is happening. And so I have stopped so much about talking about technology. Like I only really talk about technology when it's about training people how to use it, right? Or it's or I'm talking to the IT team, right? For everyone else, I stopped talking about the tech and started talking about people, right? Mm-hmm. And I started talking about business value and goals and content, right? Valuable content as well. So for me, that's the thing that sticks out because at least in my experience, technology gets so much of the focus. People think it's all about the tech. And I just really just shrunk how much I talked about the technology and talked about so many other things, people, processes, valuable content, whatever is important to that particular community. Mm-hmm. And really shrunk the tech talk.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Again, going back to what matters to you and what stands out to you and what you want to get across. So I love that. Still appeasing the executive voice and their needs and your own and putting yourself first there. I really like that. Okay, so we'll probably have time for 2 more questions, then we'll move out to the breakout rooms. Next question from Maureen. Do you ever find that folks want to stay in a cycle of repeated data collection activities and seem reluctant to move to action on that data? You were talking about that earlier.
Right, yeah. So there are definitely points in time where I'm pretty bold and Maureen and I actually know each other. Maureen knows me I will just stop providing the data.
I'm with that.
If you're not gonna act on it, then I don't have the resources to continue to give it to you. And it's really questioning them about how are you using this, and I make the case I'm spending resources to provide this with you, to you, Can you please help me understand the actions that you can take so that I can continue to use my resources wisely or effectively? And if that can happen, then I think it makes sense to me to stop providing the data because nothing is happening with it. But like I'm bold that way. Like I will just not provide you the data anymore. So
I'm going to take a lesson from boldness from Lisa Tallman. Yes, 100%. I love it. And that also ties in with like data and feedback too, because I once heard someone say that unused feedback is the worst thing that you can do for yourself and your community. So same thing here. Unused data is just you have all the information, you know where you need to improve and what you need to do, and yet there's still no action. So that's an interesting concept that I'm gonna stew on. Okay, last questions before we.
Oh yeah, it's like if you're providing reports that they're custom, they're just being emailed out. As long as you don't have to as long as you're not using resources, right? That's maybe not a battle I'm gonna fight, right? But when they come to you and they want you to do something or you to give resources in a way, then they have to prove that the resources being spent in a valuable way.
No, that definitely makes sense. All right, last question before breakouts from Casey. Okay, they ask, any good resources, examples, or templates that community teams could use to formulate an effective strategy/roadmap? Sometimes it is hard to know where to start with written strategies.
Yeah. My first thought is I think I belong to the community roundtable as well, who does a great job of helping with road mapping strategy. It is a membership organization. The other thing is I think I would just reach out to your network. Like I am, Casey, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share the last roadmap that I wrote with you. And everybody has a different sort of way of thinking about roadmaps and strategy. But I would reach out to your network and say, hey, do you have one? And can you send me an example? And if you reach out to me, Casey, I'm happy to send you an example.
Casey, take Lisa up on that offer. All right. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is we are going to go into discussion groups. Really quickly, though, I'm going to read some guidelines. So these breakout rooms are going to be for 20 minutes. Being on camera is highly encouraged. However, if you're unable to do so, that is totally fine. You're able to just unmute and speak when you want. Please give space for others to share. Do not talk over each other. I know it's sometimes hard with Zoom because you think and you're like, oh, sorry. Critique the response, not the person. When we regroup, we're going to popcorn share in the general chat, and I want to hear everything that you all are working on. So without further ado, I just in the chat dropped the discussion doc. Lisa's going to actually be going around to each of the breakout rooms, so you might get a surprise little visitor if you're lucky. And we will start this now. So give me 1 second. Okay. And everyone's going to be prompted to join the room, so just click OK, and we'll have you head in there right now.
Kudos to those of you who stayed and wanted to get the most out of talking to other people and learning from other people. So awesome.
I mean, right, Lisa, that's where all the magic happens. That's where you really get to dive into just a deeper discussion, let the conversation flow, go where it goes, and just learn things that you wouldn't necessarily learn without talking to people, So yeah.
That stayed. And I had a great conversation with Jessica. So thank you, Jessica.
Yes. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much.
She says, find out more about executive goals so you can build on. Yes, absolutely. Like if and I think that's right. Sometimes you're not in the loop, right? Make sure you get in the loop, whether it's through your executive sponsor, whether it's you just asking, make sure you get in the loop so that you can figure out how to tie your work to what is happening in the organization.
Yeah. Rena and I had a nice conversation about that. And so again, she was my partner. So I was able to talk to them and, figure this out and get some CMX Summit developer marketing tracks, right? Right, Rena? Let's go.
You're talking to the right person with Anne Marie. She can make it happen.
Whatever you want to learn, if we can get that down, I'm here for you. Please reach out to me. Like, I want to put content and put people like Lisa that can educate all of us, help us grow, help us thrive, help us rise, help us be bold. That's going to stick in my head for a hot minute. Boldness, here I come.
This is my yellow, right? Like, where my bold gold for this.
You do not, Lisa. Bold gold.
Bold gold.
I'm right. Hashtag bold gold. Okay, so that's gonna be a thing now. Okay, we're having way too much fun right now. Bold gold. Now's where all the jokes come in too, huh? Right. All right, everyone. Lisa and I are just going to sit here chatting to ourselves now. Get ready for the comedy show of your life. I'm totally joking, but hashtag bold gold.
Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye, everyone. Check us out next time, okay? We'll see you soon.